Not sure if we'd be joined by a state assembly member, Brian Cunningham, but Brian Cunningham is here. Not only that, but he brought his youngest advisor, his son, Senator Cunningham. So, and we're waiting for Rachel Fee, who should be with us in a minute. So, Brian, if you could join us on the stage along with Ahmed. So, this panel will be looking at policy. As we've been hearing this morning, there's a lot that can be done with property if you know how to, if you have the property and you have the expertise and you have the financing, but we know that policy sets the rules of the road. Policy can make building, and there, hi Rachel. Policy can make building possible, and policy can make building very difficult. And as we heard from Samir, and we'll be hearing about a policy that we weren't yet able to pass, that without passing it means that developing housing, particularly in small towns in New York State, is now still very difficult. So, but we also have some wonderful stories, and Ahmed and Rachel were a big part of a great success that we recently celebrated called the City of Yes. And I'm going to let them go over the details, but the fact is developing policy is a collective decision. Just as we heard from Samir, if towns don't want you to build housing, it makes it very difficult to build it. So developing consensus is a key part of the game. And I think we do that by educating each other, by encouraging each other, and I must say, particularly when it comes to affordable housing, to really follow the commandments of our faith, to learn how to welcome the stranger. This is something we all need to learn to do, and we're going to need to get better at it as we hear about policies that have made building housing possible, but don't necessarily make housing get developed unless we could all join together and make those things happen. So let me just start off by introducing my friend over here to the right, Ahmed Tigani. I was looking, Ahmed and I have known each other, I think it's been 18 years, I looked it up. So. And we first met when Ahmed was, I thought you were on the staff of Gail Brewer, but I realized you were on the staff of Linda Rosenthal, who didn't.
I was at the council. I was working for actually Helen Rosenthal. At that
Helen Rosenthal. Okay. So, and then when Gail Brewer went from city council to borough president, Ahmed was in her office, and then when Gail was moving off borough president, Ahmed occupied an office in the HPD. And then moved on to now being the acting director of HPD. So we have the top person at HPD sitting here with us, and a really good man. And so I'm honored to call Ahmed a friend. And let me say, you know, I've been doing this work for now 42 years, and I've met a lot of folks, and some of them you know are good people. Some you're not sure about, but some you know. And Ahmed is someone that we know is standing up for the right things. I'm seeing his notes all the time on Facebook about all these great events he's going to, all these great policies he's pushing through, and this is a real champion, folks. And we hope he can continue to, whatever happens at the level of the mayoralty, we hope that Ahmed continues to have a place because he's doing some incredible work. And we'll hear more about it in a few minutes. And then second, and gentlemen, I'm getting to know a little bit. We haven't known each other long enough, but I get a good feeling about this man because he brings his son, which how can you argue with that? So he's brought his youngest advisor. So Brian Cunningham is a member of the State Assembly representing Central Brooklyn, including Crown Heights, has served from 2022, I believe. And we've asked Brian here primarily to tell us, in addition to give us the news, the good news and the not so good news and the maybe good news at the state level, but also specifically to talk to us about a piece of legislation that he's co-sponsored. He's a sponsor in the Assembly, along with Senator Gennardis in the Senate. which is exactly what Samir was talking about, the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act. So we want to hear about that and what we need to do to make it pass. And I just want to say, the state recently passed a housing voucher. Now, we know that the history of housing vouchers goes back many years. Traditionally, the Section 8 federal voucher has been the go-to voucher. And when Section 8 vouchers became less available, the city put together its own voucher, kind of a few missteps. But now we have the city FEPS voucher, which is, I believe, housing 51,000 households. It's the largest voucher program. Am I right in that number?
Yeah.
Around there?
Is by volume would be the fourth largest or third largest in the country.
In the country. So we are now stepping in where the federal government has stepped out and are making amazing progress. But we've been trying at the state level to put together a state voucher for at least 6 or 7 years that I know of, and maybe more. We finally passed one. And it's $50 million per year for 2 years. We wanted it to for 5 years. We wanted more than $50 million. But the fact is, just to say that these things take time. That a Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, which was introduced 2 years ago, didn't yet get past the finish line done this year, but it's going to pass because we're not going away, and it needs to happen. And so Brian is going to tell us a little bit about that. And thirdly, Rachel Fee, who I can't say enough about Rachel. Rachel is the executive director of the New York Housing Conference, which has been around for about 30 years, something.
That's too many.
Too many years. Well, we had a mutual friend who was part of the founding of it, Carol Lamberg, who just passed this year. But Rachel has been the executive director now for about 5 years or 6 years, or yes, 10 years, right? And the New York Housing Conference is, from my perspective, the go-to place to find out what's going on at every level of housing policy. And somehow Rachel has it all in her head, what's going on. She knows much more about it than most people I know. And also, not only with information, but really providing an opportunity for people to get engaged in really important issues. Rachel is also very involved in what Ahmed's going to talk about first, the City of Yes. I won't spoil it, but just to say that there had been no change in citywide zoning policy since 1961. And when you drive down the street in Brooklyn or Queens and you see six buildings, and 5 of them are single-story with a store, and one of them is 4 stories with housing above it, that housing became illegal to build as of 1961 because those folks figured we have enough housing in our neighborhood. Yeah, but a lot of people don't have housing in any neighborhood, and they need housing. So after 2 years of work, Rachel taking a really important lead, and Ahmed playing a lot of the work behind the scenes, we made this happen. The City of Yes passed, but the thing is, it passed with 3/5 of the city council, which means that the entire city is required to follow the law, or at least the zoning is now in effect in the entire city, but 2/5 of the city did not vote for those changes, which is why I talk about how policy is just the beginning. We have to make sure that our neighbors want to welcome others who are different than themselves. And this is part of the work of my organization, the Interfaith Assembly, part of the work of the Interfaith Affordable Housing Collaborative, part of the work of the partnership, and part of our work of how do we help our neighbors, particularly from a faith perspective, to be able to live out our values of welcoming the stranger. But it starts with policy. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Ahmed, and just tell us whatever you want, but start by telling us about the City of Yes, and then anything else you want to touch on. Thank you, Ahmed.
No, thank you. And I would be remiss without mentioning the fact that they're similar to the compliments you've paid to us. There are very few people who you could be counted on to be in both friendly crowds and tough crowds to talk about the importance of affordable housing, but Mark, you are certainly one of them, so thank you. And thank you all. Many of you are faces that is easily recognized in these discussions because you continuously stand up for the need for affordable housing wherever that fight or that discussion needs to be. The idea that we are talking about the housing crisis in so many venues now, in so many places, that the number of people who understand that pro-housing policy is the only way we can continue to have the New York that we want, because for so long, and maybe in still too many corners of the city. People fight against housing as their argument for keeping the New York that we want. But those of us who work with vulnerable families, those of us who are watching people move out of New York because they can't live here, understand that our housing supply, the lack of housing supply, especially affordable housing, is the reason why we're seeing the New York that we care about disappear. And that is not something that can be accepted. So we do have to take action, and we do have to make dramatic, forceful change where we can. From a policy setting place, maybe these are numbers that you've heard before, but calculations suggest that in order to meet up with the housing demand and the supply that we need, over the next decade, we need to create something in the neighborhood of over 500,000 units, or 50,000 units a year. An older analysis suggested that New York, at best, was creating something between 10 to 12,000 units a year. The delta of only being 1/5 in the space that you need to build in order to meet the demand is something that creates a lot of why we keep on saying that we're in a housing crisis right now. Furthermore, if you think about it from an economic perspective, there was a State of the Economy report put out earlier this year by the Economic Development Corporation that suggested that between 2011 and 2023, we created nearly 900,000 jobs, 893,000 jobs, I think that number was. But over that same period, we only created 400,000 units. So yes, we're building jobs, but we're not creating the place where people can come and be part of the city. And this is a city of 8.5 million. It's a tri-state economic area of nearly 20 million people that interact within the 5 boroughs. Not having stable, accessible housing at multiple income tiers creates instability not only for those families, but this economy that we're trying to hold up as well. So City of Yes is a really important piece. It doesn't start as a standalone idea, though. It actually has its roots in the fair housing work that this city started several years ago. So during the Obama administration, rules changed. There was a rule change at the HUD about how we talked about fair housing. So as a municipality, we had a requirement to affirmatively further fair housing, but not a requirement to create a plan to advance that. So the city had spent a number of years doing the work behind where we live, which is the city's fair housing plan and has been since 2020. We've worked and so far are moving on at least 80% of those recommendations, but the idea that the responsibility, and I've been involved in a number of neighborhood plans, a number of individual projects from the public sector side, that the responsibility of building that housing fell too often on a smaller set of neighborhoods. It fell too often on a slice of this city rather than every borough having a responsibility of delivering those units. And Rachel could tell you, because her organization has done the tremendous work of spotlighting this issue, and I'm going to mess this up, but the top 10 council districts have been producing the far and vastly affordable and accessible housing that the city gets. But the other 49, where are they? So you have this responsibility to build. We know that mobility, access, and equity only comes by giving families choice of where they live and where we build. But the tools to give them that choice has been hamstrung in a number of ways. First, as a city, we need to do a better job on the regulatory side. Those of you who build understand that there are frustrations in working through the 6 or 7 different agencies in which you have to put in forms and documents and repeat often the information that you've already just given to someone else. And for our part, we have tried to take account of that and build that into a plan called Get Stuff Built, which is 111 recommendations that cross HPD, DOB, DEP, LPC, this is acronym soup, the landmark preservation, environmental protection, Department of Buildings, Department of Finance, all of these different agencies that do have large and small roles in developing housing in the city of New York. The goal is to reduce the regulatory time that you spend by 50% and save projects upward of $100,000. I will give one, in there's technology sharing, there's information sharing, there's being smarter about how often we have to ask you for information rather than go into our own databases and get that information ourselves. One really great example is this thing called the Green Fast Track. The Green Fast Track is us looking at data where we had sites over and over that were building a moderate number of units or something on the larger side of 175 or 250 in neighborhoods where environmental reviews were being required. But 99% of the time, no findings were being found. That environmental review were costing people 5 figures, 6 figures in cost. But if we were able to come up with a set of pretexts, you were building a passive house or electric building, you were not near certain sun-sensitive sources, there was a list of items that if you were building within this framework, we knew that you weren't going to have impact. So then why do you have to still go through that process? So it was in Get Stuff Built, we went through the CAPA process, and now that's not a step that you have to do for those buildings. And that brings me into the second piece, which is we talk about the regulatory piece, but zoning and building code, that also is an obstacle to the work that we do here. And I'll be careful about this. Zoning and building code serves a tremendous purpose. I was chief of staff at the Department of Buildings for 2 years during the COVID years, and there's a lot of reasons why the building code and the zoning resolution is there to protect, create, and make safe, and really provide appropriate context to where things should be. But at the same time, the nature of our construction has changed, the nature of what compatible uses has changed, the density, even the footprint where those buildings can go, the things around them have changed to suggest that we can do more, we can build more density, we can build more types of things next to each other. So City of Yes is 3 parts. We're not going to review all because I really should turn the mic over. But there's City of Yes for carbon neutrality, which focuses on sustainability. City of Yes for economic opportunity, which really talked about our main thoroughfares, our commercial businesses, how we're building commerce in the city of New York. Then there's City of Yes for housing opportunity. And it really focused on the fact that we have low density areas. About 40%, a little over 40% of the city is low density zoning. That could be contributing more to the housing effort, and we were able to make gains there. We really focused on transit-oriented development, the idea that we have these great areas of the city where we can continue to move people in and out. We focused on congestion pricing, which will allow not only us to get revenue to build up the MTA, but also create better and stronger bus networks, express bus, and be able to build more housing in places where, especially corners where that density could go up. And then, obviously, we've been, since the mid-'80s, looking at incentive zoning as a way to create capacity for first voluntary and now required affordable housing. The nexus between allowing density for affordable housing has been a case that has been made both in zoning and in the courts now for a significant amount of time. And we've built both the case law support and proof of concept where we can get to a place where City of Yes can take a requirement and make it citywide, that where you have density, you also are mandated to build affordability. And so in the universal affordability program, which started off one way and is a really good example of how advocacy and feedback from the community shaped it to be better. 20% of that floor area is for affordable housing at 60% and lower. I also say through these discussions, we also took in the MIH program the 40%, 20% and 40%, and it's become its own standalone option, which was something that always had to be coupled with another option and actually allows projects to build deeply affordable as a standalone, and I think will help a lot of families and projects moving forward. The last thing I'll say, there's a lot in City of Yes, but the thing that a lot of faith-based institutions also asked for was more flexibility with development rights. And so through the campus rules and the full block movement, Prior to that, you could move development rights from one site to another, or you can use 7979, which was a provision in the zoning resolution to go across the street if you were a landmark property. But now there's more flexibility on the whole block, and if you have a campus, there's more ability to move that density around the campus, which again I think will benefit and really came from a lot of conversations with the faith-based community. So there's a lot in City of Yes that we should be celebrating, but there's still more to do, right? So we still have neighborhood rezonings that we're working on. Jamaica represents a great opportunity to work with faith-based institutions in Southeast Queens to build more. We've talked about the state legislation that the city is supportive of as well to help bring more flexibility for faith-based institutions. And I'll just end where I sort of started on the fair housing point. We're not going to meet our fair housing goals and building in every borough unless we identify both private and public sites to do that. The private sites that we can build with and partner with mission-based organizations is with the faith-based community. So you are a very key part to making the fair housing goals that started this come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Good afternoon, rather. How are you guys doing? Good. It's been a long night for me and for my son. We finished votes on the floor on the State Assembly at about 2 a.m. This morning and drove down straight. So forgive my attire. Wanted to drive comfortably, but wanted to keep my commitment in being here. Thank you so much for your comments, Commissioner. Thank you for stealing my notes as well. He said everything I wanted to say, but I'll add a couple of things for color and context just in terms of where we are in terms of the housing crisis in the state of New York. Obviously, I think we acknowledge that there is a desire and a need to build more housing. But I think there are three other factors that are leading to the crisis across the state, one of which is keeping people in their homes. We've seen over the last few years, particularly during COVID, the exacerbated number of evictions going through eviction court, and obviously the state has stepped in to make sure we provided some temporary relief in terms of making sure tenants have the protections they need, and also some of the resources to pay their landlords and make sure that people can keep their mortgages. I think that's a two-sided conversation. The second piece that we are really seeing a lot more, particularly in Brooklyn and talking to the Attorney General about, is deed theft, where people are losing literally their homes all across the state, particularly a huge concentration in Brooklyn, which has been a huge issue for us, and we have a package of 4 pieces of legislation that we're working on to help crack down on deed theft. The other piece is really when you talk about the affordability crisis and you talk about affordable housing, it's kind of easy to make a blanket statement about what's affordable for who and in what areas is that affordability. We've seen, particularly in the district I represent in central Brooklyn, which is Crown Heights, Prospect, Lefferts Gardens, and Flatbush, that we've seen the rents exacerbate and housing costs go up over 126% over the last 6 or 7 years. The starting price for a home in my district is about 1.5 for a nice fixer-upper, and for a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, you're looking at about $3,000 a month for new construction. So what we're seeing is also the need to look deeply and more specifically at community-driven incomes. Generally, we have had a long-standing practice as a state to follow the federal guidelines in terms of AMI, which would look at both the 5 boroughs, Westchester and Long Island. But we do know when we look at those 5 boroughs, we look at Westchester, we look at Long Island, that those income levels based on where you live in those certain communities may vary. We have a bill on a state level that would actually codify that when state funding is being used, whether it be through 421A or any state subsidies given to developers, that we would essentially make sure we reflect the medium incomes of the communities in which that housing is being built. That is a priority bill for me going into the upcoming session, because it's time to make sure that people that help build communities can stay in those communities as well. Thank you. The last thing is obviously the elephant in the room, which is the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, which I'm happy to carry and champion with my colleague Andrew Gennardis, with the support of Open New York and so many other, including the host today, the coalition. Peter, I see you out there. Thank you so much for your support this session. Let me just say, in Albany, sometimes big things take a while to get done. But we know that the winds of affordable housing and the conversation around affordable housing has picked up quite a bit. We know that particularly in the 5 boroughs, we have a lot of support from a lot of members. Where we could use your support is really using Long Island as an example in Westchester, where we still have some challenge. You wanted to say something about Long Island? Some challenges in regards to some of the colleagues who have some challenges with it. There are one set of colleagues who describe the infrastructure challenges and making sure that we have the kind of infrastructure we need, particularly in certain parts of the island. We do know that in some regard, there was a lot of federal money that came down over the last 4 years under the previous administration that would have helped alleviate some of the infrastructure needs. But we also know that there's also a resistance to the reduction of just single-family households and figuring out how do we move forward into a 21st century where people can live in different parts of the state. So we are working hard with our colleagues out in Long Island. I appeal to you to reach out to other pastors, other faith leaders, call other state lawmakers. It is really the pressure sometimes from the outside. It's not so much the one-on-one conversation among colleagues, but the constituents who we represent, and we represent about 147,000 people per member. And those constituents and those advocate voices help push legislation over the finish line. So that is the big thing for us this upcoming year. We close off this session. I do anticipate, for those who know, the legislative session usually runs from January to June. And when we do sometimes come back for a special session, I do imagine with all the federal changes that are happening around us that the state will probably be back sometime in September or in October for a special session to address some of the fiscal cliffs that we're looking at. And I anticipate that we'll probably be able to put together some comprehensive legislation on the housing front, because that is a part of the cost in New York that's soaring. Obviously, childcare, hello, somebody, is another big cost that people are seeing. And obviously, as we talk to faith leaders and people of faith, another big issue is obviously making sure we protect the vulnerable New Yorkers, particularly those who are undocumented and are trying to find their way. So I thank you for your support and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Could you, for those of us in the room who are not familiar with the details of the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act, maybe another few minutes on what it's proposing?
Sure. So let me first talk about the most important part of faith-based affordable housing, which isn't just the building of units, but providing the technical assistance, particularly to faith leaders who are trying to build housing on their properties. We all know that faith leaders have a great knack for teaching the gospel, for providing other services. But when we talk about what it means to close a deal and to have that support from soup to nuts, that is something that you don't necessarily learn in theology school, right? You don't learn how to close real estate deals. So the technical support piece helps with that part of it for those who have concerns about faith leaders being taken advantage of and their properties being taken from them in the midst of trying to close sometimes very complicated deals. The second piece is it really says that some of our zoning, as was outlined by the commissioner, is just outdated, right? And there's no reason why we have willing and able faith partners, whether it be a mosque, a synagogue, or a church, who wants to help provide a service to New York to provide additional housing on unused land or to repurpose their land to provide housing. And that is the spirit of the bill, to help us reduce and restrict some of the outdated zoning laws that would help us exacerbate and create almost 60,000 new units of housing. I think the commissioner mentioned we need about 50,000 per year. We can do that in year one with faith-based affordable housing. We can find other opportunities to create housing up and down the state, from Buffalo to Brooklyn, from Syracuse all the way to Schenectady.
Thank you. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah, and let me just say, I was asking Rachel. Rachel certainly works in New York City, but works at all levels of government. So we also asked her to give us a little bit of a clue into what's going on in Washington, which we may not want to hear about, but we're probably better off knowing than not knowing. So thank you, Rachel.
So Mark gave you some sense of my experience in affordable housing. I just wanted to make sure the assembly member knows that I also have major skills in peekaboo, itsy bitsy spider, baby cuddles. You need me at any stage, I'm here for you.
I'm going to tag you in 5 seconds.
Yeah, his multitasking is incredible, though. So I wanted to maybe just start where Ahmed started on the City of Yes. That was a really major achievement for New York City last year, and I think it's great just to acknowledge that it got passed. Like, it really wasn't easy. It was, you know, a difficult political environment, obviously, with a mayor and a council that were in very different places. But I think what really cut through was the need to do more on housing, right? That elected officials really are starting to feel that pressure of, we need to act, we need to figure out how to act and take those opportunities where we can. So we were really excited to be part of that effort to build support for City of Yes, but you know, that's just one measure of many needed to address our affordability crisis. So I kind of think of our tools for adding more affordable housing in different buckets. One is zoning. We have those citywide changes now that will add a little bit more housing in every neighborhood, but we're still going to need very significant additional residential zoning capacity added in neighborhood rezonings. So I think one interesting thing for you all to look at would be our website. We have a mayoral housing tracker, and it shows where the different candidates' positions are on these issues. And you know, I think zoning is a really big one. Another one is tax incentives. Obviously, we look to Albany for that. They've been quite imperfect in the past. But it's a really essential part of our affordable housing strategy to leverage the market where the market wants to build anyway. Let's require some affordability there. And so, you know, that's something we've gotten behind at New York Housing Conference and will continue to do so. And then the other bucket is capital subsidy. We have housing plans at both the city and state level that invest directly in affordable housing. Most of that's 100% affordable, and really making sure that that investment continues to be strong, especially in a difficult financial environment. And then even when we build more housing, we know that the lowest income renters are still struggling to even pay those costs. So it's so important what happened in Albany this year of starting a new state rental assistance program, HAVP, that will have to be a priority of expansion moving forward. And I also just want to give a shout out to the city, because I know that there currently is a proposed rule to increase rent burden on city FEPS voucher holders in year 6. And I think the expansion of city FEPS has been so significant in averting humanitarian disaster in New York City. It has helped more than 50,000 households be stably housed. And I think the move here, I mean, it's like a huge credit to DSS. And I think the move here was really to try to save the program, right? It's not that some policymaker thinks, yeah, these renters should be paying more. I think it's really to try to do as much as they can with limited resources. It's not a proposal we agree with or could stand by, but I just want to share that, because I think there are no easy choices with limited resources.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just want to take thank you. And if you look at the rule, there's a lot of nuance there that's really big to try to protect from those increases. I think if my colleagues from DSS were here to talk about it, because we work a lot with city FEPS vouchers in our housing. You know, the program right now is over $1 billion. It is a growing program. It's expanded into new areas. It acts as its own project-based program, which is not something that existed before. It only happened after the city really made the idea of homelessness as a housing problem the central core of how we coordinate. The level at which we work very closely together, Molly and myself, on housing issues did not exist before between HPD and DSS. And due to advocates like Rachel and yourself, that became really a big thing. But I do want to note, and I want to thank the assembly member who was here as a representative of the larger group. There were capital commitments that came out of the state this year that's also going to be very impactful to housing. So as part of City of Yes, there was a $5 billion commitment to expanding housing resources on a number of fronts. But from the capital side, there's a $1.25 billion commitment from the state that's going to fall into areas like new construction, advancing the renovation of vacant units in NYCHA, creating a new revolving fund that will allow us to finance mixed income projects, money dedicated just to Mitchell-Lamas, which if you think about preservation, preservation isn't only a keep the buildings up program, because once you renovate buildings that have been offline or units that have been offline, that becomes new units. Our preservation work is actually new supply work. I know. I'm excited too. So I just want to say the state also has put skin in the game over the next 5 years. The city put up $1 billion. We're at a $24.7 billion budget, but I will be the first to say it's still not enough. We still have a pipeline of new construction. We still have a pipeline of preservation, and we are trying desperately to strike that balance between funding projects appropriately to meet today's costs, but also stretching the dollars so we can get as many projects in the pipeline.
Thank you. Rachel, you want to continue? Thank you. Let me say, Ahmed, so the proposal, just for those of you not in the weeds, so after 5 years, the proposal is that a city FEPS contract or agreement would renew, but for those who are working, instead of paying 30% of their income towards rent, with the city FEPS paying their balance, if they're working, they'd be paid 40% of their income towards rent. And let me just say, my thought is that if we lift the cap on the upper income and encourage people to continue to earn more, maybe that could make the difference. And then we're saying to people, you may have been homeless, but now you're housed, and now we think you can really give value, and you can earn as much as you want, and we'll still, until you don't need the voucher anymore, let's have you pay 30% of your income towards rent, and the number will go down. So let's see. But I think, for me, the key is to see people as valuable. People who have been through trauma doesn't mean that they're always going to be a drag. They will be an asset if we treat them as such, and I think that I'd love to see that reflected in the policy about the voucher numbers. But that's enough of my soapbox. But Rachel, back to you.
So I thought I would use my time just to kind of say what I think is on the horizon on the affordable housing front, just to put it on your radar too. So like I said, the first one would be how the mayoral candidates are thinking about housing policy. And you could check out our website, thenyhc.org, and there's also some handouts on the tables now that have a QR code that would link to it. And they're like, how I'm judging candidates' plans is, are they investing enough, and what are their ideas around expanding housing supply, especially affordable housing? Are they prioritizing the preservation of public housing? New York City's most affordable housing stock is still in dire repair. And then how are they addressing homelessness, and especially the approach around using city FEPS vouchers? So those are some of the things, like whatever, we're going to have a mayor, and that will set policy course for, the next decade probably. So we really want to make sure we're holding them to account. At the state level, this next session will be entering our final year of a 5-year statewide housing plan. So we're really thinking about, what are the set of needs there, what more we can be doing to push the state to encourage adding more affordable housing across the state, especially where there's opportunity, if that's around underutilized commercial lots or transit-oriented development. So that's like a next big thing on our radar. And then what I wanted to spend a few minutes on is what's going on in Washington in terms of housing at the federal level. So the president put out a budget proposal to Congress with really severe cuts proposed. And, I feel like a lot of people I've talked to have said, well, Congress isn't going to go for these cuts. Last time they largely ignored his budget, but, it feels like everything we had expected previously is shifting. And we really need to take it seriously. So I want to just share what's in it. The first thing is the budget proposal for HUD is to cut HUD funding by more than 40%. Now, about 80% of HUD's budget goes towards rental assistance programs, helping people who are currently on them. So we already know that's going to be a severe impact. The next big proposal is to bundle the rental assistance program, so Section 8 tenant-based housing choice vouchers, project-based vouchers, public housing, Section 202 and 811, project-based contracts that serve the elderly and disabled, to roll them up into a block grant to the states. In New York, that would be cut by almost 50%. And, basically say, like, good luck to the states. This is your problem now. Same approach on homeless grants. So again, rolling up several of the programs into a block grant and turning it back to the states to administer. On the homeless front, or the homeless grants, the proposed cuts are not as severe. But overall, New York would lose almost $4.5 billion in federal housing resources. And, that's a level that cannot easily be made up. These are really big shifts in policy. And then the other big proposal is to establish 2-year term limits for any federal housing assistance. So that would apply to Section 8 voucher holders, to NYCHA residents, anybody that is not in a household with someone who is elderly or disabled. So just think about that for a minute, the scale of impact here. It could be up to 200,000 households in New York who were told after 2 years, you're no longer eligible for this assistance, good luck, you're on your own. So when we look at the average income of HUD-assisted households and then what it would take for them to stay in place, they would need to increase their income by about 5 times what they're earning now. It's just, completely unrealistic. And, would be really harmful, obviously, to the renters, but also to the building owners and also to their lenders. I think we would really have significant and widespread homelessness and multifamily mortgage default. So I say that not to scare you, but to activate you. I don't think Congress will go for changes this dire, but they're so dire that we have to talk about opposing them. So there's a handout on your table, and it has a QR code in the corner. You can scan it with your phone, and you can sign your organization onto our letter to the New York congressional delegation, telling them that we oppose funding cuts to HUD, we oppose block grants to the states, and we oppose term limits for HUD-assisted households.
Can I just add, obviously I second everything that Rachel said, and I will put a timing perspective on that for you. So right now, we just finished hearing initial preliminary hearings on the budget in front of the House and the Senate committees that look at this. And we are reassured to have heard probing questions both from Republicans and Democrats, but Republicans and Democrats have different pressures on them. So even if you've listened to that and you hear that there were some probing questions, it is going to absolutely require overwhelming push to make that happen. So the timing for that is very much right now. They are going to be working on this for the next couple of weeks into early July. This is absolutely the moment to mobilize. And if you want some direct context for HPD, that's $60 to $70 million we use annually to build senior housing in the city of New York. That's $140 million we use to do code enforcement, to protect tenants who are asking for us to check on mold and leaks and bad windows. That is somewhere in the neighborhood of 16,000 vouchers from HPD's allocation that go to stand up buildings or help individuals get opportunities in the private market. These are very tangible, real things that your neighbors, your friends, people that we count on being part of our communities will suffer. So there's absolutely tons of reasons to spend the next couple of weeks right now calling people and lighting the fire.
Before we're going to take some questions about what we've discussed, but I also, before we do that, I wanted Rachel and Ahmed, if you'd like, to weigh in on another process that's going on now, which is that the city charter is being reviewed for changes. And I know Rachel's group has been trying to educate us about it. I'm not up to speed, but maybe, Rachel, you can tell us what's at stake and what the issues are.
So when there's so much uncertainty facing us, I feel like that local control, like do what you can locally, is what we have to grasp onto. So there is a mayoral charter commission right now. They will propose, hopefully they propose questions on the ballot to voters in New York City, and we should know what they're going to propose in July. And one of the issues they are looking at is how to make it easier to build housing in New York City. So my organization and many others submitted recommendations on what they should change in the charter to make it easier to build. So I'm not really sure what they're going to land on. It's an independent commission, but they are really serious about this work. They have been taking public input, I think, since February, and really taking this very seriously. And I know that they are looking at our current ULERT process. Are there ways to make it easier for affordable housing, or make it quicker, or an easier process specifically? But that's not all they've been looking at. So I really don't know what they're going to propose, so we'll have to wait and see what comes out in July. But what they do propose will be put to voters on the November ballot. So that's a great opportunity. Once that comes out, evaluate it, see if it's something you can support, and let your neighbors know as well.
Yeah, I would just add, so right now, the preliminary report based on that feedback that was collected since February was released at the end of April. You can get that information that they've developed, complement that with the work that and is going on the ground. There are 5 different subject areas that include procurement, housing, pro-democracy activity. There's a lot covered there, but on the housing side, what I will say that I find very positive, because from HBD's perspective, we certainly care about creating housing, but we also put a lot of time into community engagement and working through that as a anchor for our work. They are looking at both how do you speed up and look for examples like the Green Fast Track, where data suggests that we could be building housing more effectively, but maintaining that sense of public input, but do it in a way that's more efficient. So when you look at that, I think that is ultimately where the balance is happening. And the last thing I'll say, having spent years also in campaigns, remember to tell people to check the back of the ballot. When it's time, people forget that sometimes information happens on the back of the ballot. So just a reminder.
Thank you. Listen, let's give our 4 panelists a round of applause. There we go. Again, I want to say that a lot of folks are very critical and suspicious of government officials. We have 2. I call you a quasi-government official. But the fact is that there are some great people doing great work, working their hearts out to make life better for all of us. And I think even when we have a disagreement, let's remember these people are working hard because they want to make things better. They're not our enemy. We may have disagreements, but we're really, so many of us are on the same side of issues. And I'll just, when Bill de Blasio established his voucher, and it was insufficient, the number was insufficient to pay for most apartments. There were 11,000 vouchers. I think there were 900 apartments citywide that you could pay for with those vouchers. Clearly, it was not enough. And we work with the city council, with particularly Steve Levin, who was the head of the General Welfare Committee, to try to raise those levels of vouchers. And we finally did. But I know in working with my colleagues, people were saying, well, should we go after Steve Levin? Should we make his life uncomfortable? I said, he's our best advocate. Ask him, how can we help you be successful? Don't make his life more difficult. He's the best guy we've got. We're on his team. Let's make him, he's the quarterback. Let's help him get to the finish line. So I think that's the way to deal with many elected officials. They're there because they want to do the right thing, and it's damn hard. The numbers have to work, right? And we have to make them work, and we have to build public support for sometimes making difficult decisions, which really benefit all of us. So I just want to, again, it's great to have all four of you with us today. And so, yeah. So we have about 20 minutes for questions. So if anyone would like to ask a question of any of our panelists, I don't know if our friend Senator talks yet, but maybe we'll pass on him. But any questions, just raise your hand and someone will get a microphone over to you. Yeah, back there, yes. Dee, someone get her a microphone. Get that lady a microphone. Yeah, here she is. Let me just also acknowledge we have so many allies here in the room. I know many of them, and Deandra works with the Sisters of Charity of New York, and so glad you're here, and with Sister Claire. So, yes, hit the button.
There it is.
There
Thank
we
you.
go.
Yes.
Thank you. Good.
So yes, just like Mark said, I'm the advocacy coordinator at the Sisters of Charity of New York at the Peace, Justice, and Integrity of Creation Office. I'm here alongside Sister Claire, also part of the Sisters of Charity of New York. And we are advocates for the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act right now. We're doing letter campaigns, we're calling, we're educating the community and all that. So this question is for all the panelists, but specifically the Assembly member, Brian Cunningham. By the way, I was also up at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. because I have a newborn as well. So I understand. But my question, I guess, is a two-part question. I know the Faith-Based Affordable Housing Act is primarily a bipartisan bill right now, but how would you convince your constituents, or how would you have us help convince constituents that it's a good idea? Oh, the ones that are hesitant. And then, you know, like I said, we do letter campaigns and all that. How can we, with moral authority, help better advocate, basically?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think part of the challenge that sometimes us as lawmakers assume in Albany is that there are thousands of bills introduced every year. In fact, this year there were 12,000 bills introduced, only 996 bills passed the New York State Assembly, right? The Senate, I believe, passed 1,026. So you thinking about that, those numbers are very low. The other question one has to ask themselves is, when these bills are passed or introduced, how much of that information gets out to the general public? I know that many of us who are sitting in these spaces, we're deep in the weeds of the policy. I think the reality is there's not a lot of convincing needed for a lot of our constituents. It's getting the information to our constituents. This bill exists. And I think part of that, again, is leveraging our faith-based leaders to really talk about the bill, to have some awareness of the bill, to understand what the bill does, what the bill doesn't do, and get that out in front of their communities and their faith-based institutions.
And just to follow up, so there still is a chance, or what is the likelihood, or what's the path in the next legislative session before the end of the year? What's your sense of what's possible and what we need to do to make it happen?
I think, look, in terms of this co-sponsorships, I think we're over 30 or 40 members of the State House and the Assembly, at least, who've co-sponsored this bill. I think over 20 in the State Senate. So we're in a good spot from a numbers perspective. I think the big thing has been, if people remember back in 2022, the governor's first State of the State, she outlined a very broad housing compact. And I think what happened was a lot of folks, because it was so widespread, took a step back from the housing conversation conversation. I think as we move into and this year, we were really super focused on affordability, and housing is a part of that affordability, but it wasn't the whole conversation. I think as we get into 2026, obviously there's city elections this year, but there are also state elections next year. A lot of us will be on the ballot, and a lot of constituents will be asking the question, what have we done for affordability broadly, but what have we done to keep people housed in the state of New York? And I think that election year pressure will, I think, and ultimately land us in a good place on trying to produce a housing bill that we can get to the floor that addresses the supply issue. As I mentioned, there are other issues we have to address in terms of protecting tenants, which we did this year, and also the other piece of protecting owners through deed theft. So I believe there will be an omnibus package of legislation, and I think it really involves a collective effort of labor unions, clergy members, constituents, elected officials, and everyone coming together. That's how we delivered $1.3 billion for Downstate Hospital this week, and that's how we'll deliver faith-based affordable housing in the upcoming session.
All right. Rachel, I know you were very involved in the compact, the effort to, in effect, mandate neighborhoods to build a certain amount of affordable housing, and that ended up being withdrawn by the governor. I think the sense was you don't want to tell communities what to do. Even if they want to do it, they don't want to do it because they're told. But any sense of what you think where we're going with the faith-based affordable housing?
I think what the assembly member said is right. The effort to push so hard on housing with the housing compact really had this backlash effect of scaring Albany off of zoning related proposals. So I think it's just a lot of work. It's really sitting down with members, explaining exactly what it does, demystifying the bill, and really picking them off one by one. And I think then making the case to leadership in the Assembly and Senate that it has to be a priority at a leadership level, something that they really need to fight for. So just also a shout out to Sisters of Charity, who I know have affordable housing in districts of two important Republicans, Maliotakis in Staten Island and Lawler in Rockland County, and have been doing some advocacy, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Who has a question for any of our panelists? We see someone over there. Okay, good.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Debbie Whitaker, and I was glad to hear the efforts about City of Yes, which is a fabulous change to the zoning, and that there are efforts also to change the charter to make it easier to develop. So, and my business partner and I are working with faith-based organizations to develop a prototype for infill housing on smaller lots to create affordable housing. The idea being have a template for the financing structure, but also for the design to make it easier and less expensive to develop the housing. So I'd be really interested to hear more about what might be considered as part of the charter changes to work toward this same end.
Well,
yeah, good.
I would definitely urge you to look at the Green Fast Track as a lens as you evaluate sites across the city, obviously looking at City of Yes to see what you already may have in your building envelope as a result of these changes is a second lens that you should add. There are a number of other site diligence that you're probably doing in order to evaluate other things moving forward. Additionally, and I think Rachel mentioned this, right now we've got a neighborhood rezoning in Midtown South that will yield 9,000 units. But the big focus there is commercial and residential. We have Long Island City. We're looking at 3 other neighborhood rezonings that will further make tweaks and articulations to the zoning that will filter down to medium lots. So there's neighborhood changes that will add another layer to your evaluation. We are, after maybe a 5 or 6 year hiatus or drought or delay or however you want to call it, we haven't updated our term sheets in a while, and we're in the process of updating our term sheets right now, which will more accurately reflect the cost that you're seeing in developing housing. So staying within those term sheets will get you also further. And then, last but not least, there are things that are not, completely right, but things that we're doing with the boards of standards and appeals to look at that as an avenue to work with, things that we're doing with LPC in historic districts as they relate and are part of decisions when affordable housing gets built in those districts. There's a lot of small and big machinery happening to look at that, but just right off the bat, I think looking at those sites through some of those initial lenses already in place and picking next sites for viability based on the term sheets and where those neighborhood rezonings land will give you a good set. And then the last thing is, from a funding perspective, thinking about what you're looking to do. So if you're doing 100% affordable, obviously that's going to be subsidy dependent. If you're able to build a portfolio of mixed income, then you're using either the incentive tools or you're just using the requirements under the abatement or the zoning, which is good because you're delivering affordability, and then as the owner, setting whatever the rents are you want from the market, creating maybe a little flexibility in your cash flow. So a lot of things you can consider.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say, so Deborah is working with Michael Lappin, who had been the director of the Community Preservation Corporation about 35 or 40 years ago during, I think it was the Beam administration, and then when we almost went bankrupt, went into the Community Preservation Corporation and used this kind of model to, as I understand it, well, to fast-track programs by having an efficient process of permitting and funding stream. And what they're now saying is that with six, so zoning, R6 means you can build 6 times your floor area. R5 means you can build 5. We have in the past said that unless you can build about 40 units of affordable housing on a lot, it's not worth trying. But at this point, with the City of Yes having changed that calculation, and with 485X providing more tax incentives, and with the idea of fast-tracking, working with a small network of properties, there are some possibilities that exist that hadn't in the past. And anyone who believes they have a small site, who might be interested in learning more, I encourage you to go over and just see Deborah. What they're looking for is to see if they can assemble a number of sites in the neighborhood and create an economy of scale, and then get a set of approvals for all the permits for all the sites at once and a whole funding stream, because as we know, time is money. And as we heard from the earlier panels, sometimes these projects can take 10 years. If you can make it happen in 3 years, you're saving a ton of money. And we don't want to see any site go to waste. And there are a lot of sites that up to now have not really been utilizable, and through their process and their expertise, they may be. So if you're interested, go and talk to Deborah over there and give her your name. No commitment, but just let her know you're interested in learning more.
Yeah, I'd be pleased to talk to any of the church organizations. No obligations, no cost up front.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Get the microphone over to that young man over there.
Where? Oh.
and then his neighbor. Thanks, Meta.
I have a couple of quick questions. One about ghost housing. I understand it's about 50,000 pieces of housing that need about $100,000 or more of work. They're rent controlled, but they're not rentable because of the conditions. And then also, I read in the New York Times about these foreign wealthy investors that are purchasing these units that they never live in, and I was just curious about what's being done around that.
So I'll start backwards. So real estate has always been a commodity that people can invest in, and people are able to purchase homes if they're unrestricted. If it's HPD financed, buildings or HDC finance, city, state finance, there are requirements as to who can purchase if it's a home ownership opportunity. It's owner occupied, it's your primary residence. So that kind of activity doesn't fall within that same landscape of the work that we do. But there are government programs that are there that are part of sort of that larger market activity. I will say that this is not in the condo area, but the same issue has come up a lot for 1 to 4 family homes, the idea of corporations versus individuals purchasing these homes. The state has just moved forward with an idea, and I think it got in the budget. I think it was passed in the budget, but basically it's a new pilot that they're trying where they have a 75-day waiting period before a purchase can go through if it's purchased by a corporation, and it's there to create a period where if there is a reason why it should not go to that corporation, it also gives an opportunity more to the community and gives them a little bit of an advantage in being able to have individuals come in and be the occupiers of those homes. So we congratulate the governor and those supporters for trying to be innovative and think about how to put more opportunities in the hands of homeowners. This is in addition to what the state and the city does, which is we have our down payment assistance program, up to $100,000 for eligible prospective buyers that help get access to homeownership opportunities. So there's a lot on the homeownership front, but I get that question. And then I think on the first question, the city actually there's some debate about those numbers. The city does its own housing and vacancy survey. It's done so since the late 60s. We use it as sort of the basis for understanding the housing crisis in the city of New York. It is part of the rent stabilization system. And so there are vacancies in the city of New York. The true vacancies that we see, we talked about that vacancy number, it's 1.4% for units that are $1,650 a month as a benchmark right now. That's under 1%. It's basically virtually zero on affordability. There are owners who have a legal limit on their rent stabilized apartments that they see that the cost of operating it means for them that they will not rent it out. There are programs. We have at least maybe a dozen programs on the preservation side to help with cost and repairs. It does come with them restricting the income. It does come with requirements that they abide by certain rules and regulations, but on the preservation side, we do it. We also have a program, the state and the city has a program called Unlocking Doors, which does connect them with up to $50,000 in repair assistance in exchange for taking a referral out of our shelter system, who comes with a City Fabs voucher, but it comes at the legal limit. So we help with the repairs. So we deal with that offset cost, and it allows us to move someone out of the shelter system. And then the last thing I'll mention is J51, which was not around for a while. And again, thanks to the state, we were able to renew it. It required the council, who took longer to establish on the local level and now is in place. But without J51, we didn't have it as a right tool where owners could make repairs to those units without getting that out of their cash flow. That's here now. It expires soon again. We'll have to renew it again and hopefully make that available for those repairs that you mentioned.
And I'll just clarify the legislation that passed in Albany, Ahmed. It was disincentive bulk purchase. So it's a 90-day period where it just applies to 1 and 2 family homes, but institutional investors are not allowed to bid on the home for those first 90 days. So the idea would be to try to give a leg up to a home buyer that wants to be the owner-occupier.
Yeah. So
there's a lot in that budget.
Thank you. Did we have one more question? Let me just say, after this question, we're going to take a brief break. And then we want to come back for our final panel, but as an incentive to have you stay, and it'll be a general conversation that'll be co-chaired with Meta and Ted Houghton, 2 of our board members.
And Gerard.
And is Gerard here?
Yes.
Okay, good. And 3, very good. Welcome. Hi. But as an incentive to stay, each of you have a red ticket. And we'll be doing a drawing, and there are 2 prizes. And I don't know any of you who know, there's a wonderful historic Italian restaurant right across from the cathedral, V&T. Wonderful pictures in there. There's a picture of my mentor, Jim Morton, holding the hand of Mother Teresa. You have to, it's in the shadow near at the place. I mean, it's a wonderful place. The place has great spirit. And there we have a $50 and a $75 gift certificate for dinner there. For those, but the drawing will be after the next panel. So as an incentive, I know it's a long day. It's been very rich. I think it's been a great day. But stay a little longer, and you'll have your question answered by 3 housing development professionals, and then we'll do the drawing. We'll see who wants to go out and have an Italian dinner. It's good for 6 months, so you don't have to look at your calendar today. So
Mark, one final question over here.
One more question, and then we'll take a quick break. We'll come back for our final panel.
Good afternoon again. My name is Simon Morel, and I live in Washington Heights by 152nd Street. In my building, we have 5 families living in my buildings. They were moved from a building located in 150 close to Riverside Drive. They living over there for 15 years, waiting for the building being renovated.
Oh my God.
15 years, they living over there. My question is simple. Do you know if Columbia University or other organizations like New York Presbyterian Hospital, they have some way to blockade the accessibility of sources for our community? Because they are waiting for renovation of the building, and they don't receive the technical assistance, all those things like is necessary for them to have affordable housing. And then I appreciate your conversation, your conference, and then I understand your commitment in order to help to new policies for affordable housing, but I want to understand realistically, what happened in our community. That's my simple question. Thank you.
It's a simple question, but probably one of the most important that was asked today. So I'll give you my information after, so I can understand exactly who those residents are, and we can trace back that project. But I'll tell you that different programs over the decades that they've been developed have had unequal results. There's one program, and this is my sense of where this might be. There was a program called the TIL program, a tenant interim lease program, which over time has had moments of great action and moved very fast. And then there were times due to a lot of disagreement and political conflict had paused. Sometimes it was funding, sometimes it had to do with what the rules and regulations were and whether it was a disagreement between the tenants and the city, or the city and the advocates, or the tenants and the advocates. But I will say on that program, we've just recently put out a new term sheet, which we think addresses some of those issues and will bring people back into homes. But there have been buildings where there are tenants who have been relocated for a very long time. My own family had a very similar situation, which resulted in an eviction, so I understand what that displacement does to create trauma in a family. But the idea at the end of the day is that we have to be responsible to those individuals who have been waiting. So I'm happy to talk about that individual case. So we'll circle back on that. Big picture is, the reason why we try programs out is to see what works and what doesn't work. In this case, it was a program that ran for 3 or 4 decades under a certain kind of expense and capital rule structure, and then we were told that we couldn't use money in that way. We changed it in 2012 into a different program, and then ran into a number of different political, operation, and other obstacles, and have been in this muck for another 5 years thereafter. So in 2017, 2018, there were issues with advancing those projects. It's only been in the last 2 or 3 years that we've been able to get more projects done. Actually, in the Washington Heights area and in Inwood, we had 2 of these buildings. One was on Arden Street, 21 Arden. That was a building where tenants were displaced for 10 years and came back. So slowly rebuilding that process with new terms, a better strategy, a new community engagement director who's there to do better contact between the tenants, the technical assistants, and the agency. So it's not mission accomplished, but we have some better tools in place.
One final question here. Can you make it short?
Thank you. I worked all my life. I worked in the government. I came out of Department of Justice on Wall Street. My question to New York, we came from the South to fulfill our dreams in this city. We haven't been able to. We lived in homes in the South, in the city. We lived in the streets with all kinds of turnaways. And then there are unsafe conditions, and there are discriminatory activities going on. I haven't been able to resolve anything, not even with the police department, with evidence. I'm tired. I'm 68 years old. I can't bring anything new at the habitation I'm at now. I don't know what these cats are into, but they put things around you like a chain of corns and things on your bed like whatever they're trying to whatever. We don't believe in that. We're Christians. We don't get into rituals and these things that people get into, that they publicize in the news and on the streets. So we've been very victimized. I suffer a lot of trauma, not to be mistaken for anything degrading of my intelligence, because I didn't come up in an abuse lifestyle. My family are cops in the city. 8 have served the city faithfully. I just don't know how to contact nobody since I moved away. I want a chance in New York because I lived there for 30 years. I deserve one. I'm disabled now and I can't afford the rent that, I could in the past. Thank you. Safe conditions. We're women. We don't want to wake up with markings all on our bodies and things going on while we sleep. And they say, don't put anything behind the door to secure yourself. Maybe you're interested in getting involved. Thank you. And we want a voucher. We want to get out of this stuff so we can be, if it's no more than I feel safe around the senior citizens. I'm 68. I'll live with them if I have to, but not with what I'm inside of. Okay, present. I like the place. I like the surroundings, Madison Avenue. That's my lifestyle, quality living from the South. But something is wrong with the people we hire or the people we're trusting and what we have to inhabit. We've never been on drugs. I'm not knocking nobody, but we didn't have that lifestyle. Now things are happening, and it's unsafe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So I want to thank our 2 panelists and the other one who's wandering around.